He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Greetings everyone, and welcome back to another uncanny episode of Supervillains Explored. This video is the official beginning of my Brotherhood of Evil Mutants marathon, where I explore the history and exploits of the multiple enemies of the X-Men. Kicking off this marathon today, I will explore the background and lore of the infamous race of mutant hunting robots known as the Sentinels. So relax and enjoy. The Sentinels first appeared in X-Men number 14 in 1965, before the book had adopted the uncanny adjective. In their first appearance, we learn that the Sentinels were created by a human scientist named Dr. Bolivar Trask, who believed that mutants would use their powers and abilities to dominate humankind. So in order to eliminate the threat of the mutants, Trask would create an army of robots dedicated to destroying the mutant menace once and for all. In order to perfect the weapons and combat capabilities of the Sentinels, Trask had enlisted the help of his son, Larry, who himself was a mutant. Larry Trask was a precog. In other words, he could see into the future. Trask had developed a special device to keep his son in line, a high-tech medallion that could suppress Larry's future visions and wipe his memories clean of them. Trask exploited his son's precognitive abilities in order to observe all the different mutants that the Sentinels could possibly encounter. He would study his son's future visions and record details and data on all the different mutants that were presented in his visions. Trask would program different weapons and defenses into the Sentinels' hardware that would give them an edge over any mutant imaginable. Trask would reveal his creations to the world during a televised debate with Professor Charles Xavier himself. After revealing the existence of the Sentinels, Trask would then activate them and send them on their mission to exterminate all of mutant kind. The Sentinels' loyalty to Trask was short-lived, however, as the leader of the Sentinels, Master Mold, had decided that in order for the world to truly be safe, the Sentinels would have to rule over it themselves, without the shackles of their human creator. Under Master Mold's command, the Sentinels proceeded to kidnap both Professor X and Trask. The X-Men would eventually find both Trask and Professor X in the Sentinels' custody. Trask eventually realizes that not all mutants are evil and decides to help the X-Men destroy the Sentinels for good, which he succeeds at, but ultimately dies in the process. But like most other Lee and Kirby created villains, the Sentinels would eventually return to plague the X-Men time and time again. Bolivar Trask's son, Larry, would attempt to continue his father's work, having no previous memory of his mutant nature, and he would ultimately meet the same fate as his father. The way that his Sentinels were dealt with, however, was that Cyclops would actually convince them to destroy themselves by flying into the sun, making them believe that the sun was the cause of mutation. Yeah, I know, comic books are weird. So over the decades, there would be several more storylines where the Sentinels would be reactivated and modified by various evil organizations and entities ranging from the Hellfire Club to the American government, Onslaught, and Hank McCoy's evil clone, the Dark Beast, to the Asgardian god of deception himself, Loki. The only time I know of where the Sentinels were actually used for good purposes was when Earth was engulfed in a huge war against the time-traveling villain known as Kang the Conqueror. During the comic series known as New X-Men, Professor X's evil twin sister, known as Cassandra Nova, proceeds to use Boulevard Trask's nephew to find the remains of Master Mold. She kills Trask's nephew and assumes his form in order to gain dominance over this Master Mold and all the other Sentinels. Using the army of Sentinels at her disposal, Nova uses them to annihilate almost the entire population of the island of Genosha. 16 million, most of whom were mutants, were killed during this attack. Excuse me. The Sentinels were all deactivated, however, when the X-Men finally managed to kill Cassandra Nova. And as far as the history of the Sentinel goes, that's about it. But now I'm going to focus on a few specific Sentinels who I feel highly deserve a mention of their backstory. The first Sentinel that I will talk about is none other than Master Mold. Master Mold was the Sentinel leader as well as the prototype from which all other Sentinels were spawned. Master Mold arranged the capture of Boulevard Trask in the aforementioned battle in which the X-Men first fought the Sentinels and was heavily damaged after the battle and Trask's death. A few years after this incident, the US government commissioned a scientist named Stephen Lang, a man with a burning hatred for mutants, to create a new army of Sentinels, starting with the repair of Master Mold. Lang commanded his Sentinels from a space station that the X-Men would eventually make short work of. Lang was lobotomized soon after this incident, but an anomaly in Master Mold's programming caused it to believe that it was Lang, and thus for a while Master Mold went around possessing Stephen Lang's consciousness and attempted several times to wipe out the X-Men and the mutant population, period. Master Mold would battle several times with the X-Man known as Cyclops, and it would also invade Muir Island and force Dr. Moira McTaggart to recreate a deadly mutant disease known as the Retribution virus. After the events with Cassandra Nova happened, Master Mold would merge with another Sentinel, who is also the character I will be discussing next. The next character I will dig into is Nimrod. Nimrod made his first appearance in the aftermath of the famous storyline known as Days of Future Past. In a post-apocalyptic alternate future, North America is ruled by the Sentinels, and Nimrod was a prototype for a new breed of Sentinel. Two surviving X-Men members, Kitty Pryde and Rachel Summers, intended to sabotage Nimrod's creation, but the terrifying new Sentinel came online in the process. Nimrod murders Kitty, but Rachel Summers managed to escape into the past with Nimrod tailing behind her. And after many failed attempts to fight the X-Men and find Rachel, Nimrod found Master Mold and the two robots merged to create the character who I will be talking about last. Using his shape-shifting abilities, Nimrod disguised himself as a human construction worker and discovered a strange piece of technology that, unknown to him, belonged to Master Mold, which caused Master Mold's programming to begin corrupting Nimrod's. During a fight with the X-Men, both Nimrod and Master Mold, along with Rogue, were tossed into a mythical crystal called the Siege Perilous, which judges the moral nature of any... Excuse me. I'm sorry about that, my throat's acting up. Pay no attention to it. Anyways, the Siege Perilous is a crystal that judges the moral nature of any who are trapped within it and recreates them into new life forms reflective of the quality of their last life. Kind of like the Hindu belief of samsara, that people are reborn into a new life after their previous one. The being that emerged from the fusion between Master Mold and Nimrod was a simple human-looking robot named Bastian. After he's created, Bastian is left in the middle of nowhere in America and wakes up with severe amnesia. He's taken in and sheltered by a woman named Rose. While living with Rose, Bastian learns about the mutant situation in the world, and his opinions take the side of the anti-mutant movements, such as the Friends of Humanity, led by Graydon Creed. Bastian eventually lands himself a job in the government and creates a lethal new brand of Sentinels called the Prime Sentinels. And during a late 90s storyline called Zero Tolerance, Bastian attacked mutants all over the country, captured a few X-Men, and most importantly, he took over Xavier's school and stole many crucial files on several X-Men members. Bastian is eventually defeated and captured by S.H.I.E.L.D., but when Wolverine was made into a Horseman of Apocalypse, he sliced off Bastian's head. However, many years later, in the X-Force books, a group of anti-mutant terrorists named the Purifiers, who were previously led by the late Christian fundamentalist Reverend William Stryker, find Bastian's head and attach it to the body of an old, obsolete Nimrod model, which succeeds in bringing Bastian back online. Bastian's ultimate plan to erase the X-Men and all mutant kind from existence forever involved using the offspring of a cybernetic alien hero named Magus, and using the technology from Magus's body, from his offspring's body, he resurrected the villains Cameron Hodge and Stephen Lang, along with Bolivar Trask, William Stryker, and Graydon Creed, creating his own vision of the Purifiers. And during the Second Coming storyline, Bastian conspires to murder the so-called mutant messiah known as Hope Summers. A few years prior to this storyline, an event called M-Day happens where all the mutants in the world were depowered. And the storyline Messiah Complex introduced the idea of a newborn mutant messiah, which was Hope. At the end of the Second Coming story arc, Bastian is destroyed by Hope and has not really been seen in a comic since. And that's all the necessary and essential knowledge that you need to know regarding the Sentinels. Pretty much the single most important group of villains and adversaries in the entire history of the X-Men franchise. And I find it rather disappointing that it took the X-Men movies about 5 or 6 movies until they actually started showing the Sentinels. But what are you going to do? That's all I have to say for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more videos.